Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Sean, and today we are talking about our favorite games of 2024. And we're going to be doing a top 24 of 2024, partly because we think it sounds cool, but in large part because there were just so many games we really liked this year. And even getting this down to 24 really broke our hearts. So we're going to be doing this in two parts, and we're going to be splitting that up basically in half. This is going to be the first half of that. And really all of these games are super solid.
Yeah, and so we ranked them all individually first, and then we took an average, and we're going to be talking about our averaged 24. But there was disagreement in the order of the rankings, and we each had one from our individual list that didn't make the average list. So mine that got missed out is Castle Combo. And in Castle Combo, you are building a 3x3 grid, and you're trying to make combos with those cards you're putting in. But it's really quick, it's really snappy. Every time I play it, I immediately want to play it again, but we've only played it on Board Game Arena.
Yeah, and that is why it didn't make my list, because I like to feel and touch and smell, especially smell and taste games. I don't love playing them in a 2D screen, so I think it probably loses something. Once we play it in real life, I'm going to like it a lot more. It probably would have been on our list if we played it in real life. The one for me that didn't quite make it is In the Footsteps of Marie Curie. And I think this is just a really terrific, light engine buildy-ish kind of resource management game. It's got this great tower thing that you're dropping cubes in and only some come out. I don't know how, it's magic. And then you're taking those and then you're using those to fulfill different experiments and stuff. And I just think it's really clever. It's really quick. I think it's one that's going to pick up steam that kind of came out a little later this year and is going to pick up more steam next year.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying that the In the Footsteps series are covering scientists, and I'm really curious about what's coming next. But for us, what is coming next is our official top 24 games. 24. Number 24 is Super Club Rivals, and in Super Club Rivals, you are football or soccer managers trying to put together the best team. And this is a smaller two-player version of Super Club, which we haven't played, but it is simulating a soccer season. You have multiple games where you're building your lineup, you're comparing lineups to see who wins the game, and then who wins the overall season. And I think it does such a great job of simulating that, like being a soccer manager.
Yeah, and I love this kind of game. So I had a bunch of these as like computer games when I was a kid, these like hockey manager games where you don't play hockey at all. You just set up lineups and it's stats and it's like comparing stats, and I love that. I find it fascinating and it works really well here. And I really like the foldable thing that you put your team in, and there's just little things like you can build up your players, you can make them better, you can train them, you can like lend them out to other teams, there's injuries, but all within this like simple rule set. Yeah, soccer's never been a favorite sport for me, but this one works really well and did win me over to it a little.
Yeah, and I love the meta game of just trying to predict where you're going to put your strongest players, and this really won me over to this type of game, and it's our number 24.
23. Number 23 is Arcs, and I had this one. This might be the one with the greatest disparity between where we place them, and I think the reason for that is that I played this at 4 players. I played this a bunch of times at 3 or 4 players, and you kind of need to. That's really where this game shines. And Arcs it's a mix of stuff. It's got a tiny bit of trick taking, it's got action selection, it's an area control game. It's got interesting resource management mechanics. There's just a lot of cool stuff in here. It's from Leader Games, made a lot of games I really like, and it really shines. When you're playing this at 4 players and you're in kind of the right situation for it, this can be a really great game.
Yeah, and I have only played this at 2 players, and I think it has so much I do like about it, because I also really like that you get to choose what gets scored each round. And there could even be, it's rare, but there could be a round where nothing gets scored. And so that's really interesting, because you're definitely going to be leaning towards only a couple of those categories and really hoping that they end up getting scored. So you can have these huge like shifts in points, but I need to play it at 3 or 4 players.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is just like for us, it's specifically not really the sort of thing that we play. So if you are more into kind of combative area control games, This is going to be higher for you, so maybe don't listen to us so much about this and listen to some of the other channels about this one, because it's not quite our jam, but I still thought I had some really interesting stuff, and it is our number 23.
Our number 22 is Windmill Valley, and this is designed by Danny Garcia, who's been on a real tear lately with a whole bunch of games. And for a Euro game, this is really like bright and colorful because it's all about tulips. So you have these windmills, you're planting tulips, you're selling tulips, and it does a whole bunch of Euro game things in terms of building up actions, leading to combos, but in a way that's slightly more approachable, that I feel like it's definitely not a light game, but it is a lot more approachable than like Vitel Lacerda and other combo type games, whilst doing something similar.
Yeah, I think this is kind of like we talk about gateway games all the time. This is like the gateway to heavy games.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not a gateway game, but it's like a gateway to that next step, because it does have this really interesting, the action selection mechanic is this windmill that's 2 gears that are shifting, and you can build that up as you go through the game and create these interesting combos, and there are a bunch of combos, but at the same time it's not like all the way brain burny. It's like brain tickly. It's like, it's got that little bit, and I think it's going to kind of scratch that itch for some folks, or it's going to create that itch. That doesn't sound good, but it's going to create that kind of like interest in these heavier games. It's one of the lighter board and dice games, but it's such a nice gateway into that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I feel like we had different expectations, that we thought it was going to be heavier than it was, but then once we played it a few times, we actually realized there is a little bit more under the hood than after our first game, and it is our number 22.
Our number 21 is Terminus, and Terminus is a really interesting mix of mechanics because it's got this rondel, and I love a rondel, but it's got this rondel action selection system, this cool kind of market manipulation where you've got really nice looking resources, but how much they cost depends on how many people have bought, and it's got route building that goes with that stuff, and again, that's got like some creative bits to it. There's a lot of stuff in here that you're like, oh yeah, I've seen that. Oh, but not quite like this. Oh, I've seen, oh, but not quite. It's got a lot of that going on in this game. And yeah, this was another one that, you know, surprised me a little bit. It wasn't quite what I expected it to be, but it was actually, I think, a little bit better than I expected it to be. And I like this one a little bit more every time we play it.
Yeah, because it looks like a route builder, and there is that, but there is so much more, because on top of everything you said, there's also these ways to make those actions stronger, and you can add other, like your own people to other people's ones. There's personal goals, there's also public goals. So it is a really thinky game where resources are very tight, and because the market of when you get things and when you put them back is really important.
Yeah, and we really like a game where you can build up your actions, and those actions kind of change and evolve throughout the game. And so you've already seen that a couple times on this list, and this one is our 21.
Our number 20 is Cities, and this is designed by Phil Walker-Harding, who we are big fans of, who loves taking like one mechanic and leaning into it. And so this is like drafting the board game. So you are drafting your tiles and you are adding them to make various cities, and every game there is a different city. But you're also drafting the buildings that you're putting on, drafting your goals, and so you're drafting everything about it to create your own personal city.
Yeah, and like you say, this is really drafting. This is like drafting on drafting, but it works well because you've got those kind of different levels of drafting, because you're making those chunks of your city, you're drafting the houses that you're putting on the chunks, you're also drafting the goals that you're doing for the places, and then you're drafting these little parks and water things that are going to go on top. And it's also got that tile placement part of it as well, where you're actually putting all of that stuff. But yeah, I really like this. A friend got this for me because he was like, oh, this is a Sean game. This is 100% a Sean game. So he surprised me with a copy of this, and it was. Phil Walker Harding games usually are, but this totally is, and I really like this. We play this a ton, and those different cities are really interesting.
Yeah,
too.
I was gonna say the different cities really play differently, and I like that they try and tap into the actual like aspects of the city. So in Venice, you're trying to do ones with like a lot of water and canals, and so cities is our number 20.
19. Our number 19 is Tower Up, and this is just such a pretty game. There's so much table presence to this game, and this is kind of an abstract strategy game that everyone is using the same board on. So you're building up these towers, like it says, and you're building them up. And so you're putting out towers on this board, and every time you put one down, you got to also put towers on everything adjacent to it with the same colors. So on your turn, you're either doing that or you're getting more pieces to build more towers in the future. But it's really, there's like more going on there than I had expected there to be, because everyone else is doing that too. And you're really trying to push people into a corner. You're trying to fulfill these goals. But I think a big part of it is just how pretty it is.
Yeah, it is really easy to, I think, explain and to play, but there's a lot of strategy that the more you play, you realize of like, oh, if I put this one here and then all these buildings get built, that's then going to block this off, meaning you won't be able to add to it. So the abstract strategy puzzle is really interesting. And then there's goals you're trying to do, and you're trying to get up the tracks. So even for a light game, there are like a couple of different routes that you can go for trying to get the most points.
Yeah, and I definitely thought this was easier than it was, and we played with our friend Neil, who brought it over, and he whooped us because he's played it a bunch more, and it was like, oh, I see, there's a lot of, you need to know some stuff to play this game well. But that is Tower Up.
18. Our number 18 is Tree Society, and Sean picked this up because it looked pretty.
It does.
And it's by designers we know and like Matthew Dunstan and Brett J. Gilbert. And in Tree Society, you're building this like the society in trees. Like,
yeah, it's like Endor. It's like if Endor was made by bankers.
Yeah, and you're doing that by, you have these fruit that you're collecting and you're trading the fruit in for these great looking coins, these nice chunky tree coins. And you're spending that to get new cards. And then for new cards, you're trying to like level those cards up until they go into your society. But some of the cards like help your engine, some of them are like just points, some of them help you get more coins, and there's different like types of cards that you play with each game.
Yeah, you've got like 6 different sets or 8 different sets or whatever it is, and then you're using 4 of those. Don't quote me on these numbers, but you're not using all of the different clumps of cards, and the clumps of cards play really different and really do change the game. But it's, in a sense, it's just like kind of a simple engine building-ish thing where you're trying to fulfill these goals. But every turn is like kind of interesting, and because all the cards do something slightly different, they're all pretty interesting. It's very like Matthew Dunstan and Brett J. Gilbert make these just terrific, light, fast, but still thinky games. Stuff like Guild of Merchant Explorers, which we loved as well. And this kind of is a little bit, it's very different mechanically, but a little bit of that same feel. And that's something we just generally like, and it is so pretty. 17.
Our number 17 is Saltfjord. You are in this like Nordic fishing village, and it has a really clever action selection mechanism, because what you're doing is you are drafting dice, and then you use the dice you draft to move it down your board and activate the different actions as it passes. And so that's really clever because you can add actions to your board, building those up, but you're also going to be a bit limited in what you can do based on like the roll of the dice and what's available to draft.
Yeah, it is. It's often dice drafting games feel a little bit too limiting to me, but this one really doesn't, because you've got enough ways to change them and enough ways to change your board and to think ahead, and because you see everything at the start, and so you can really think about which ones am I going for, which ones do I think other people are going for, and all of the stuff you're doing is just a little bit different. It's all kind of fun. So you're adding more buildings, you're fishing, and you're getting fish, and you're putting them on boats, you're moving up these tracks, and you can really focus this game in different directions. I think the last game we played, everyone playing all focused on a different thing, and we all ended up fairly close-ish in points. And I love that when there's different paths that you can take. It really makes it more replayable, and your board and your actions are always gonna be so different.
And it works well, I think, at all player accounts. And that's our number 17.
16.
Our number 16 is Ravage, and this is a flip and write game. And it's basically like if Silver and Gold and Trails of Tucana had a baby. And I love both of those games. And so you are crossing off terrains, trying to get to different spots on your maps. But what's really interesting is you are able to go through multiple maps. So you can choose how long you want to stay on a map, because once you cross from one ship to your other ship, you move on to a new one. So sometimes you might want to really try and get everything off of that map. Other times you might be like, all right, on to the next one.
Yeah, and this game moves at lightning speed. This is such a fast game because it's this draft and pass game is how you're actually getting those cards. And so everyone's always playing at the same time. And I think the biggest problem we have is like slowing it down enough that everyone is keeping it at the same pace, because everyone just wants to go, 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 and quickly fill up everything because it's exciting. And like everything you do is kind of like that little mini dopamine hit, right? Because you're always getting points, you're always crossing off stuff to cross off other stuff, doing these little combos, getting stuff out of bags, and moving on to new maps. All that stuff's really satisfying. We've introduced this to a ton of people. Everyone has liked it. This is one that I see as playing a lot more in the future.
Yeah, and because it's draft and pass, you might choose which ones you want to cross off based on what your neighbor might be looking for.
Right, yeah, there's hate crossing.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, I know you want this one, so I'm going to take it, which is always fun. And it is our number 16.
Our number 15 is Flatiron, and this is made from the same designers who made our number 1 game last year, which was White Castle, and they have been doing a lot of cool stuff. But this is based around the Flatiron building in New York, which is a building that I really like. And you're building this building from the bottom up. This is one of those bottom up buildings, not one of those top down buildings. You're gonna start at the bottom and build it up. I don't know, but this it is, you're building it from the bottom up. And so you've got one worker that you're putting out in these different spaces, and then that's giving you cards, and you're building up this whole bunch of cards, and you're going to set off all these different actions. So you're trying to build up these like columns of cards while also actually building up this building, and it looks really cool too.
Yeah, and it's a 2-player game, and there are only 4, well, I guess kind of 5 worker placement spots that you can go. And so you're also very much trying to get in the way of the other player to see what spot they might be wanting to go to, because if you're there, they're blocked and they can't. But also making sure that hopefully you can go to the spot you want to go to on your turn. And it is an interesting balance of wanting to build up your actions whilst also doing the actions, because the game moves pretty quickly.
Yeah, and when you go to those spots, it's like you get a card that isn't necessarily linked to the spot that you're actually setting off the cards. You'll understand it when you play it, and I strongly suggest that you do play it, because it's a really cool game, and it is our number 15.
Our number 14 is Ironwood, which is another 2-player specific game. And it is a very asymmetric game where one of you are playing as the Ironclad trying to build cities, and the other are playing as the Woodwalkers who are trying to protect nature and collect their totems. And how you're doing all of this is by playing cards, but the cards are all different. So they give you different actions, and they're multi-use. So you have to choose whether to spend cards for their action or to use them in battle, and usually the strongest cards are going to be strongest in both fronts, so it can be a tough choice about which cards to use when.
Yeah, and all of those cards are super strong, and you got a whole bunch of cards. They all do really different things. You got 3 cards that always come back to your hand that you kind of need to build up to those goals, and your goals you only have to do 3 times. But the heart of this game really is frustrating your opponent, is trying to stop your opponent from doing the thing that they're doing while slowly kind of incrementally building up so they can't possibly stop you from doing what you're doing. And those 2 factions play so differently, and it really is interesting to play either side of that. And we've often played it where we play one side, then we just switch and play the other side.
And it looks lovely. The components are beautiful, and it is our number 14.
Our number 13 is Solstice, and this is 3 in a row of 2-player specific games. Can you tell that this is a 2-player specific channel? But we really like Solstice. Solstice is this tiny little box with adorable art. And what you're doing is you're drafting these little like wooden chips. They're actually not cards, and you're putting those out into rows, and they just go in order of color and of number, and you got to get them all to connect up, because you get points for connecting up your thing as big as you possibly possibly can. But also, you want to make little groups of 4 because then you attract animals into your little cute forest setting. And those animals all have special powers and special scoring. And this is just, it's a super fast game. It's a game where you really have to keep an eye on what your opponent's doing and what they want and take away what they want as much as you can. And it's a game that we play over and over and over. We played this so much on BGA before we went and bought a copy. And our copy is actually in French, but we just learned the rules in English as well because it was worth it for us. And boy, we played the crap out of this.
Yeah, because it is just like one picture that has then been subdivided. So there is no repeats of tiles. So you can very much tell what your opponent is building. You're like, oh, they have all of the center tiles. Okay, that's going to be tough for me to get. And we definitely play it where we'll play until the other person eventually wins. So if Sean wins 4 games, we'll play 5. That's how long it takes for me to then win.
Yeah, we've had nights where I had a real lucky run where I went like 10 in a row. And I was like, please just win so we can go to bed. But also, I'm not going to let you win. But it's one of those where you're going to play over and over and over. And it is our number 13. Our number 12 is Doggerland. And I got into the theme of this one because it's super interesting that this is set in the North Sea before there was a North Sea. So Doggerland was the space between the UK and France. You might all be like, we already knew that. Well, I didn't know that until this year, okay? But I think it's fascinating. And you're doing all sorts of like ancient civilization stuff. So you're like painting in caves and you're hunting mammoths and you've got shaman doing stuff and you're making love to make new villagers. And it's all that sort of stuff. And it's just a really tight, cool system. I love that everything you do ties into the theme in this as well. It's just a very, very thematic game, and everything that you're doing, and like the scarcity of food and how there's like a summer and winter. In the winter, you need to have furs or else people are going to get too cold. And all of that stuff's in here.
Yeah, I love how thematic it is. Like, if you want to hunt a really large animal, then you have to send a whole bunch of your people. And just the visual of having all of these like wooden meeples around this mammoth is great. And it's so thinky, it's so tight, and you really have to plan ahead.
Yeah, you really do. And again, this is another one where you can build up your actions. And I really like it when I can build up my actions in a game. And this does it really well. And that makes Doggerland our number 12. Our number 11 is Looot, which is number 1 for the funnest name to say, easily. But in this game, you are Vikings, and it's got this cool kind of combination of you're putting your Vikings out on this board in order to gain your resources and your buildings. And then you also have this tile placement puzzle in front of you where you're adding those and you're trying to fill these different goals. And I really like that you've got this part here that's just you, that's like a heads down, kind of like a solo game, but then you've got this other very interactive map where you're getting stuff. And I think that works really well.
Yeah, and what is particularly interesting is that you're able to add goals to your board as well. So you're continually doing these little mini puzzles on your board, hoping especially if you can add goals that are like complementary to each other. And so it's really a little bit more thinky than you expect, with a little bit of a Calico feel, but not nearly as challenging as Calico.
Yeah, and with those goals too, because you can add as many as you want. And it really is a like limiting yourself, like making sure you don't take too much too quick, which is what I generally do in this, but also not waiting too long. And so I like that part of it as well. And this is our number 11. And that is it. That is part 1 of our top 24 of 2024. And we're going to also, obviously, have a part 2, as one always does, that's going to cover the other half of this list.
Thank you so much for watching. Please let us know in the comments if you played any of the games we talked about. And as usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.